Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The topic of our today's lecture is selecting a sample. Now, sampling is the process of selecting a sample from a bigger group, the sampling population, in order to become or to make it to become the basis for estimating or predicting the prevalence of an unknown piece of information, situation, or outcome regarding the bigger group. It is almost at times impossible to collect data from a study population to represent, to collect information from all the study population. For example, let's say in microbiological sciences, biological research, biomedical researches, you are conducting a prevalence study, and you would like to study, you would like to assess the incidence of a specific disease in a study population. You might include a bigger population. You might be naming a full city, or as your sampling area, but to check or assess each and every person from that city, the representative city or the population city, it is impossible. So what we do is in science, in research, instead of taking samples from all the participants, let's say that about the city has got about 1.2 million people living over here, and we would like to just look out for one disease, a coronavirus infection. So it is impossible to check out the samples from all the 1.2 million people of this city. For what we can do is we can just you can collect data, you can randomly collect the samples from the persons, or you can consult some doctor, some uh, medical institutes or hospitals where the patients they are visiting with the disease symptoms, and then you collect the sample from those. So a representative of the study population is taken in order to assess, in order to gain information, in order to predict or provide an estimate about the whole population or the bigger group. So a sample is a subgroup of the population you are interested in. It is the part of the group, but it is a subgroup. For example, average of the age of the student in your class, you would like to check what is the average age of students in your class. The first method, which is which is a very much authentic recommended method, sure, is and feasible at this time, is to contact all the students, find their ages, add them up, divide this by the number of the students, and that is the normal procedure for calculating an average. So that is a standard way. It's a comparatively small population, a class, therefore it's easy, it is manageable to collect their age. And the second method can be, you select a few students from the class, right? You can select them randomly or by specific sequence. First person, is collected, first person is selected, then second person can be selected in a sequence to the first person. First can be selected randomly, or use them by some sort of pre-planned number in your mind, and then you ask their age. You select some few students, ask their age, add them up, divide by the number of students you have asked, and so it is also going you an idea. Instead of taking the data from all the class, you just get some representative from the same class, and then you get their age and add them up and divide by the number of the students, so that you get the average age again. And from the second this way of calculation, you are going to make an estimate of the average age of the car. That is an estimated, that not exact. I must note get you note down over here that it is not an exact values of the average age of the students in the class. It's an estimate. So those are broadly two way of collecting the samples, let's say, of uh, average age of the students. There are there are some terminologies, sampling terminologies related to this work, the collection of the sampling, the different types of the sampling designs based upon the samples. So let's assume that we have got some few students in the class to achieve your above previous aim, that is average age of the student. In this process, there are a number of aspects. We will discuss the aspects along with the terminologies that are related to that aspect. So the very first one is called as the study population. So if you are assessing the average age of a class, let's say of an MPhil students, And the class from which you select your sample or is called as the population or study population. It is usually denoted by a capital N or N. Yes, that class is your study population. And the small group of students from whom you collect the informations to estimate the average age of the class is called the samples. Each individual person who you have taken out as your uh, participant of the study, instead of whole the class, each individual student is your sample. And the number of the students from whom you obtain the required information is called as the sample size, usually denoted by a small n. That's their number. Larger number is, it will show the population and capital N, and small n will show the sample size. And the way you select the student is called the sampling design or sampling strategy. For example, again continuing with the same example, each student that becomes the basis for selecting your sample is called the sampling unit or sampling element. The student who becomes each student who becomes the basis for selecting your sample is a sampling unit, and the findings which are based on the information obtained from your respondent or the sample is called the sample statistics. Your sample statistics becomes the basis of estimating the prevalence of the above characteristics in the study population. That is, the average age is your statistics over here. And your main aim to find answer to your research questions in the study population, not in the sample you collect information from. So what you do is, you, instead of collecting the information from whole of the study population, you collect information from specific sample size is comparatively small from individual from that population, and from that sample statistics you make an estimate of answer to your research question in the study population. That estimate they arrive at from sample statistics are called the population parameters or the population means, which you derive from that the data that has been provided from the study population. These are study parameters. What are the different aims in selecting, or what are the consideration while selecting a sample? Whenever you are collecting a sample, you are primarily aiming to achieve maximum precision in your estimates within a given sample size, and you would like to avoid biasness in the selection of your sample. That is very important. That is very important consideration, that you shouldn't be keeping biasness in the sampling. That is important. It can and the biasness in the sampling, the selection of a sample, selection can occur if sampling is done by a non-random method. That is, it is consciously done, unconsciously influenced by human choice. Whether you are assessing the average age of the students in your class, and back in your mind, you would like to have a class with uh, with the senior students, let's say, and while keeping that I should have a class with mature students, senior students, higher age group. So while keeping that thing in the researcher mind, he only selects the random persons, the students with comparatively higher age, and then he asks them their age instead of just going for the random sampling. That is a conscious decision back in the mind of the researcher might be. So it is the biasness in the selection of the sample. It leads to the biasness. Then first is, you can consciously decide. The second option is the sampling biasness in the selection of the sample. It can also occur if the sampling frame, list, index, or other population records which serve as the basis of selection does not cover the sampling population accurately and completely. You have got your some records, population records, and it is not covering the whole population. It is not accurately covering the whole population. It itself is not authentic, you know. And then if it's not authentic, then it can provide biasness in your studies. You need to carefully examine your listing, your indexing, your records, and it should be free. It should be clear from any biasness. It should cover the such sampling population accurately. It should not be, like if you're conducting a study, prevalence study, let's say of a let's say of, let's say my city, the Ahmedabad city, and we are studying us we are planning to conduct a research study based on the prevalence of a certain disease in a certain hospital. Let's say we have a tertiary care hospital in Ahmedabad, and if we would like to even name the study as the prevalence of hepatitis C, let's say virus in a tertiary care hospital in Ahmedabad. So you are going to assess the persons who belong to Ahmedabad, and whether the sampling frame or sampling listing in which you just go and collect the sample and you even take out the name out directly, but you miss that point that the person from other adjacent cities might be visiting the Ahmedabad, the city as well. For some person they might be visitors, some person they might not be having those medical facilities in their the far-flung areas or the adjacent villages or the adjacent cities or adjacent villages of the adjacent nearby cities, or they might be visiting their relatives over here. During this visit they might have come to the hospital and for assessment of the disease, and you have included them in your study as the population of the this particular city. Then it's wrong, because those persons they belong to the different city, and they have come from that city. So it changes, it includes it induces it the biasness in your study, in the selection of the sample. You need to be careful about that. And at times, biasness in the selection of sample can also occur if a section of the sampling population is impossible to find or it refuses to cooperate. So sometimes you cannot, some people, the 1.2 million, let's say, is the population of this city, my city, let's say, plus minus. And let's say I say that about, let's say, 0.01 million people, they are living in some other cities, or even, let's say, a higher population, zero point 0.1 million might be living in some other population. So it is at time impossible to find a true, you should keep that thing in your mind. Or at times the sampling population uh, refuses to cooperate, people they don't want to get involved into the study, then against the biasness in the selection of the sample, it can occur, because you would like, if a person refuses to cooperate, then you would intentionally would like to collect data or samples from the persons you might not be that much related to your study, or you are selecting the sample just because of their cooperation, their cooperational attitude. So that also brings about this biasness in selection of the sample. There are different types of sampling techniques, sampling collection of the sampling, the random probability sampling design, where you randomly collect the sample. It can be non-random, where uh, a predetermined sample size is collected, and then a combination of random and non-random sampling is also conducted in the form of a mixed sampling design. We would study each of them individually in the coming lectures. Thank you so much for listening to this talk.